Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate, and argument on a whole array of topics. Today, Greg and I discuss what is happening regarding the coronavirus spread, especially as only a couple of hours ago, the United States has declared 19 deaths and New York has declared a state of emergency. It also appears that even the Pope himself is self-isolating. So let's take a listen. Well, good evening. It is Saturday evening, the 7th of March, 2030, 100 hours GMT. And it's time for an update on coronavirus, especially as we heard today that the Pope himself is allegedly self-isolating amongst rumors that he has the virus. I thought perhaps we should ask a person who's likely to know, which is Greg. So let's check if he's on the line. Greg, good evening.
I'm still on the line and not yet
Isolating.
Sorry?
Isolating.
No, not self-imposed prison, nor setting up a hospital in my home yet. Though I freely admit that we have probably 2 or 3 weeks worth of food. Of a recyclable nature, and by which I mean if you buy a case of baked beans, and since my wife and I equals 2 people, we bought the tins that are the right size for both of us to use a tin. And this means that we will from now on, whenever we have beans, we'll take a tin from the front of the stock, make a note of it and replace it to the back by buying more to recycle. This means that if they run out completely, which could happen, though I doubt it, we will have 48 tins of beans, which at very worst would make 48 rather unpleasant and unappealing meals. Better than nothing. It's not inconveniencing us in any way. It's not costing us a fortune. It's not going to go stale, not just because it's in tins, but because we will be recycling. Over the next few days, we'll do the same with tuna, sardines, possibly tinned tomatoes, and always a good standby, good old corned horse, Fray Bentos to the fore, spam, and even the odd tin of Irish stew. It gives one a variety of very convenient, very nutritional meals. You're looking at a cost of under £200. If food becomes very expensive, we'll have saved some money. If nothing develops whatsoever and the virus is over by the end of the week, which I do not believe it will be, we won't be out of pocket purely and simply because it's still there to eat. I would say it is a common sense move.
Well, if I can add to that, Greg, one of the things that my family have purchased, which a lot of people seem to forget until it's too late, and that is toilet rolls, for the simple reason that if, as we hear in the headlines, maybe up to a quarter of workers could be off sick, knowing our luck, it'll be the people driving the lorries to the supermarkets, so maybe the produce doesn't get there. But also UHT milk, because most of us drink milk either with tea or coffee or on its own. And of course, as you know, milk has a very limited shelf life. So buying copious amounts of UHT milk, otherwise known as long life milk,
otherwise known as utterly horrible taste.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I prefer UHT milk to beans, if I'm truthful, Greg.
Yeah.
So where are we? Where are we with the coronavirus worldwide, and what's happening?
Well, I've got a big herd of cows in a field, just one field away from my house. So milk is not a priority, though it would be convenient. What's happening to coronavirus? It is slowly and steadily, inexorably taking something of a stranglehold on not so much people yet, but definitely on economies. We now have a number of cases has increased. We're up to 105,941. So I think we can safely call that 106 by the time this goes out.
Yeah.
And we have 3,569 deaths. Now, neither of these figures is very big. It sounds big, but we have 7.8 billion people on the planet, of whom so far 106,000 have caught a virus. A virus which we are told kills 2 to 3% of the population who catch it. Can somebody tell me how 100,000 people who have caught it, and many of whom will continue to have it for possibly as much as another 20 days, could possibly have produced 3,569 deaths and add up to 2 to 3%? I call that 3.5%, whichever way you look at it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the people who have just been declared with coronavirus, as I say, have yet another 20 days, possibly, in which to die, to make that percentage higher. So who is lying about what figures? Are they underplaying the number who have actually caught it? Are they fiddling with the death rate? Or are they statistically inept and haven't taken their shoes and socks off because the numbers are too big?
Well, Greg, there is another answer, which was posed not so eloquently, but I understood what he meant, although it wasn't quite what he said, and I'm referring to President Trump, because he inferred, like I said, it wasn't exactly what he said, but what he inferred was, you may very well have 3,000 as it was then, but say 3,500 deaths, and you've got 100,000 recorded infections, but there could very well be 300,000 or 600,000 infections. They're just not all recorded yet. And this is something America is discovering because their testing kits have come out late. So you could actually argue the case that when this whole thing finishes, the death rate might be 1 or 2% because the infections might be considerably higher, but the deaths may not be, if you see what I mean.
I see what you mean, just as the deaths could be incredibly higher, but the infection rate is actually lower, and it's including a number of false positives.
Yes.
So, as I say, don't believe the figures.
No.
And you put it so eloquently when you said, he said something, but it didn't sound like what he meant. Well, that about sums up his policies. And we are well aware, and the Americans have finally admitted to it, that they haven't got testing kits. It's not that they haven't been using them. The supposedly wealthiest nation on the planet, the supposedly best organized, haven't even got testing kits, leave alone any concept of cure or vaccination. Whether the second they come out with a vaccination, they will be charging us a fortune for it, whether it works or not, just as they did with earlier rounds of flu, because do bear in mind, we had the SARS virus during the era when Rumsfeld's company was providing the vaccine and sold it to all sorts of countries around the world with the collusion and acquiescence of Dick Cheney and Bush, and it was found that it didn't even work, but they still sold it for a lot of money. So I think all of these figures and all of the scenarios being painted must be treated with a pinch of salt. Now I'm going to give you my scenario. So looking at the situation, what do I actually believe is happening? I think that governments worldwide are suffering from panic, which is being controlled as best they can. I cannot for a moment think that there are only 3 or 4 cases of coronavirus in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, which is what is being claimed, when much of sub-Saharan Africa is all but owned by China. And the movement of Chinese personnel to and from Africa is frequent. How come it's spreading to countries where the Chinese aren't going in big numbers? So another figure which is suspect. I think you'll find that there are many people with the coronavirus who have such small, low symptoms that they are not showing up on the statistics. And it is the elderly in the at-risk group, not just those over 70, but those with pre-existent conditions, who are making up the bulk of the deaths, and they are very visible deaths. So it's invisible disease, but visible deaths, if that makes adequate sense. Now, every country is playing this game with the figures. I may sound as if I've criticized America, but America has been taking a very high-profile role, with Pence and Trump in position, actually contradicting each other.
Interestingly, Greg, it's come out in the last hour that Washington State's count of cases has now passed 100, and its death toll has risen to 16, and New York State has just declared an emergency with 76 cases of coronavirus. So clearly, what Trump said originally, sticking to 15 for the whole of America, and that wasn't that long ago, and now they're slowly starting to realize what the true count is, and they're still far off from having adequate tests. So goodness knows, once a serious number of the population have been tested, those figures could be enormous.
I'm quoting the official update, global update of 2005 GMT. My apologies for not including the figures you've just quoted. That has come in subsequently, and to be honest, I haven't looked at it in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that this may be an element of honesty creeping into the game, on the realization that if it is found that America has actually suppressed the figures and has not got coronavirus to blame for what could well turn out to be a huge downturn on their exchanges, that would mean that Trump carried the can for the downturn. So coronavirus is probably what he's looking for in an election year. Now, we have the same problem in Britain, where we are playing down the figures at the moment, and we're doing it on purpose, but we're actually saying we're doing it on purpose. We are trying to get the beginning end of this disease to stretch out so that when it starts to peak, would probably look to be somewhere well into April, maybe May, because there is a belief, whether it's true or false, there is a belief that 2 things will happen as we move out of the winter period. One, our National Health Service, for which I think everybody in Britain must be so overjoyed that they can be certain, whatever their financial circumstances are, to receive medical treatment in a civilized manner for everybody free at the point of need, as opposed to the Americans, many of whom will not present with the symptoms for fear of being bankrupted by their health system or lack thereof, and will be going to work in America because their benefit system will not cover them if they don't work, and they will lose their houses, they will lose their vehicles, and they will lose their homes. At least we are secure in the knowledge that our government is stepping in to assist people. Some countries have that great good fortune. Others claim that this is communism. No, communism is what Lenin and Stalin carried out when they introduced pogroms that led to the starvation of 30 to 40 million of their citizens, and a period in the 1930s when amongst the poor the starvation was so great that you couldn't kill people to eat them, but the authorities turned a blind eye to eating the corpses. I think we must heave a sigh of relief at what has been done in many of the civilized countries in creating a health service. We look at the figures for America, and they have increased dramatically, as Richard has just said, and which I have not checked, not because I doubt him in any way, but purely and simply because my figures date back to 8 p.m.
Greg, before we finish, so this isn't too long, who's suffering the worst at the moment? Which countries are the ones to watch out for in particular?
China's still in trouble, and it's also becoming apparent that it's economically in a lot of trouble. It will ride through it because of the nature of its government, where they ride roughshod over their people. Bear in mind that even through these difficult health period, they have some 2 million Uyghur in prison because they don't like their religion. They have confiscated their children and farmed them out to other people for re-education, and many parents in China will never see their children again. So for China to be in trouble financially, they will get through it. But don't forget, it's only some 20, maybe 30 years ago when almost everybody in China was a dirt poor peasant. Now they have a flourishing car purchasing community, such that they've gone from cart tracks to 8 and 10 lane highways in the last 25 years. Areas of China have become immensely wealthy. This is rather hard, I find, to reconcile with the stated aims of communism. There are still dirt poor peasants, but there's also immense wealth alongside of it. South Korea is also in a health and thus potentially economic muddle. Japan has now banned incoming flights from South Korea, which is leading to some animosity between the two countries. Italy has now gone up, it's spiked by 1,247 new cases in the last 12 hours or so, when it's now standing at 5,883 cases. It's also had 233 deaths recorded for COVID-19. But here again, the percentages go absolutely balmy. South Korea has 7,000 cases and 48 deaths. Italy has 5,800, but 233 deaths. So these generalized percentages are very dangerous. Iran has 5,800 also, that have increased by 1,000 today, so much the same figures as Italy, and rather than 233 deaths, they have recorded 145. So there again, the percentages don't stack. France has 949 and 16 deaths. Germany has 800 cases, and as yet, no deaths. So it is a bit of a muddle, but just about every major country now has a significant number of cases, and almost all the countries of any significance with 150 or more are starting to show up with the inevitable deaths. The other reason, of course, that I didn't cover why the British government is trying to prolong the matter is not just so that the health service will be in a better position to deal with it, but if we get the spike to, or the bulk of the problem in terms of the doubling of instances on probably a weekly basis, you'll find that the spike will spread over probably 3 months. So you're looking at, if we can delay it, June, July, August, or July, August, September for the bulk of the cases. It is absolutely possible that we could find, before we start developing a herd immunity, i.e. when one talks of a herd immunity, you're talking of every animal in that herd having developed an immunity by having the disease. By the time we've developed that, we could be talking as high as 80% of the population having caught the disease. The vast majority will recover. Many, the fit and the young, or perhaps I should say the fit young, will barely have noticed their symptoms. But this means when we move into next winter and the virus is coming back to bite us again, hopefully it will not have mutated greatly, and that herd immunity will stand us in better stead. So I think the government is taking the long view of delay so that we have the bulk at a time when we can cope with it better, so that we can be sure that we have a high percentage of the population has had it going into the winter months again, when it is believed that it will be harder to deal with, partially because we spend more time indoors, closer to each other, and with more moisture in the atmosphere, so easier to catch the disease, but also because that is the time of year when other diseases are higher, there's greater pressure on our health service, and it's harder to provide the best service for those who are ill. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you very much, Greg. And perhaps we can catch up again on Monday.
Indeed. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Indeed.
Without sneezing.
We hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if so, kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of our videos as and when they are published. And also in the description box below, we place links to certain books, articles, and programs which you may find of benefit, and for which we will receive a small commission should you purchase through our link. And this will help support our channel and to enable us to develop it further.